Their real breakthrough came when a small, multi-legged creature with tough plating and twitching antennae, a skitter rat native to the colony world they'd been captured, unscurried from the vent. Before Maria or Ana could react, Gibson lunged with shocking speed, his massive hand slamming down over the creature with a faint crunch. "Appetizer," he announced, a triumphant, almost feral grin spreading across his face. Now they needed heat. Using Gibson's brute strength to pry loose the service panel, they exposed two thick, insulated power conduits. With painstaking slowness, Maria wedged a metal shard from Gibson's bunk frame between the exposed sections. For a second, nothing happened. Then the lights dimmed perceptibly, and the shard began to glow, first a dull gray, then cherry red, then a brilliant orange. Gibson thrust the impaled skitter rat against the makeshift heating element. A sizzle, a sharp pop, and a thin curl of smoke carried the unmistakable scent of cooking meat. After 20 seconds, the power cut out with a loud clunk. But they had done it, created a piece of cooked meat no bigger than a man's fist, charred outside and probably raw in the middle, but the most beautiful thing any of them had ever seen. A visceral, messy, glorious scent of defiance in a sterile, hopeless place. Meanwhile, in his pristine laboratory, Hestian stared at a holographic display of the human's gut biome samples with deep intellectual revulsion. "A symbiotic cesspool," he muttered to Pierre. "Thousands of distinct microbial species competing and cooperating in a chaotic, unregulated soup. The biological equivalent of using a sledgehammer to open a data chip when an alert sounded indicating atmospheric anomalies in the detention block unidentified, organic particulates, and elevated carbon dioxide. He merely logged it as terminal stage biomarkers and filed it away, completely misinterpreting the signs of their survival as evidence of decay. 3 days passed, then 5, then 7. The Alarian's timeline for the human's demise came and went, unmarked and uncelebrated. Inside the cell, a grim but effective routine had been established. After catching one more skitter rat, the vent fell silent. Their diet now consisted primarily of 2 food groups, mold and wall. The mold patch, carefully cultivated by Ana like a prize-winning orchid, had spread along the condensation pipe. They harvested it in tiny, controlled amounts, which Ana referred to as their vitamin and protein supplement. Gibson called it pipe cheese, but the true staple of their diet was the insulation from the power conduits of fibrous, pale yellow material that Maria had determined, through a desperate taste test, was cellulose-based and technically edible. "Tastes like despair," Ana had declared after analyzing it. "To our gut biome, it's basically cardboard. Highly processed, inorganic cardboard." So they ate the wall. It was chalky and dry, a compressed dust that made their gums feel raw and scraped their throats on the way down. But it was something. It was fuel. After a week of this diet, the sluggish weakness of the first few days was gone, replaced by a wiry, coiled energy, the lean efficiency of predators in a time of famine. Their cell, once a monument to sterility, had transformed. The air held a permanent haze of ozone and something damply organic. A neat pile of skitter bones was stacked in one corner. The insulation around the power conduit was visibly shredded. It was no longer a prison. It was a den. Chief Exorsurgeon Hestian reviewed the data for the 10th time, his 4-jointed fingers drumming a frantic rhythm on the edge of his console. His impatience was curdling into confusion. The subjects were stubbornly refusing to follow the proper curve of decline. Their biometrics were all wrong: heart rates stable, core temperatures normal, waste output consistent. Frustrated, he switched from his elegant charts to the high-fidelity video feed. He zoomed in, desperately searching for signs of decay. He saw Maria tearing off conduit insulation. He saw Gibson pacing with predatory energy. He saw Ana scraping mold into a neat pile. He saw it all and interpreted it all through the perfect, unassailable lens of his own genius and established doctrine. Every action they took to survive, he interpreted as a symptom of their impending death. His scientific mind built a fortress of flawed logic around a core of absolute certainty. The humans were already dead. They were just too primitive to lie down. It was only when Administrator 7 contacted him, Exorsurgeon. Their waste output has remained consistent. This contradicts all 63 prior deprivation models that a tiny crack appeared in. Hestian's fortress of certainty. Aina decided it was time for a science lesson. Using a sharpened rat bone, she scratched a diagram into the metal floor, a long, coiling, ridiculously complex series of loops representing their digestive tract. Alarians made a fundamental species-level error, she explained, her voice filled with academic excitement, entirely at odds with their grim surroundings. They looked at all biology and saw nothing but flaws. She tapped the drawing with her bone stylus. To an Alarian whose entire digestive process is a single elegant organ the size of my fist, this is a nightmare of inefficiency. But our ridiculously long intestines exist for one reason: to maximize nutrient absorption from low-quality, difficult-to-digest food. We evolved as omnivore scavengers, designed to eat whatever we could find. She pointed to a spot deep inside the coils. And in here, we have our secret weapon, our gut bacteria. Trillions of microorganisms that have evolved with us. That biome can break down complex fibers like the cellulose in that insulation. Things that would pass right through an Alarian or kill them. Maria stared at the diagram, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across her face. So our biggest biological weakness is the reason we're still alive. Biology is a high-performance racing engine, Aina finished. It needs pure, refined fuel. Powerful, but brittle. One bad tank of gas, and the whole thing seizes up. Ours is a rugged, all-terrain diesel engine. Messy, loud, smells bad, but you can run it on damn near anything. They finally understood. Their supposed biological inferiority wasn't a flaw, but a feature, a rugged, unstoppable engine of survival cobbled together by millennia of desperation. Hestian was staring at anatomical charts when a priority communication chimed. A shimmering, featureless silver ovoid appeared on his display, the sigil of high command. Your deprivation study is on its 8th cycle. A cold, synthesized voice intoned. A doctrine predicted systemic failure by cycle 3. Explain this discrepancy. Hestian felt a chill settle in his bones. These subjects are anomalously resilient, High Administrator, he stammered. The biology is proving more complex than our initial models anticipated. Complexity is another word for inefficiency. Exhaustion. The voice cut like ice. The starvation doctrine is built on the universal constant of metabolic requirement. There are no anomalies, only failures in observation. Provide a definitive result. The Imperium has no use for inconclusive studies. The transmission cut, leaving Hestian frozen. The abstract academic horror he felt had curdled into something far more personal and primal fear. He needed the humans to die now. Maria recognized their opportunity. They think we're dying, she whispered. Hestian needs us to be dying. It's not just a scientific observation anymore. It's a professional necessity. We're going to give him the performance of a lifetime. During the next scheduled observation, Ibsen took center stage. He collapsed to the floor with an agonized groan and began to convulse, his powerful limbs thrashing against the metal. For the final touch, Aina had him chew a mouthful of their dark green mold paste, creating a grotesque froth at his mouth. In his lab, Hestian watched, his heart pounding. This was it, the terminal seizure his models had predicted. Get in there, he commanded the guards outside the cell, his voice strained with manic urgency. Attach the portable bioscanners. I need to record every second of this organism's termination. Sir, quarantine protocols forbid. One guard began. Override them. Hestian snapped. Direct order from a chief exorsurgeon. His desperation had overridden decades of ingrained caution. The guards, bound by hierarchy, manually unlocked the cell door. The sterile seal broke with a soft hiss of escaping atmosphere. The two Alarian guards stepped into the cell. One knelt beside the still convulsing Gibson, a portable scanner in hand. The other stood watch, posture radiating discomfort in the air, thick with ozone. Unwashed human and something vaguely fungal. Then Gibson's seizure stopped abruptly. He exploded upward, his hand shooting out to grab the kneeling guard's arm, while his other arm wrapped around its torso in a bone-crushing bear hug. A sickening crack echoed as the guard's sleek armor fractured under the raw brute force. Simultaneously, Maria and Aina launched themselves at the second guard. Maria went low, tackling its long, slender legs. Aina drove the sharpened rat bone deep into the exposed seam of its elbow joint. For the first 30 seconds, the Alarian's superior speed and strength were overwhelming. Their movements were a blur of efficient strikes aimed at nerve clusters and joints. But then a subtle shift occurred, a faint tremor appeared in the guards' limbs. Their movements became fractionally slower as their energy reserves depleted. In contrast, the humans, bruised and battered, were just hitting their stride. They fought with a grinding, relentless momentum born of desperation and a week's worth of slow-burning garbage. They didn't have the explosive power, but they could just keep going. Gather round, for I'm about to tell you a tale that spans the stars. A story of arrogance meeting its match in the messy miracle of human biology. In the pristine laboratory of the Alarian vessel, Chief Exorsurgeon Hestian floated with the practiced grace of a being who had perfected every movement over centuries. His slender four-jointed fingers hovered above the human specimen a captured marine designated Contaminant Alpha, laid out before him like a puzzle to be solved and discarded. Observe closely. Alkalite pure, he intoned, his voice a meticulously modulated baritone calibrated to complement the ship's ambient frequencies. It is imperative we establish a baseline for this organism's crude architecture before we appreciate the exquisite simplicity of its systemic collapse. Laboratory was a monument to sterility, recycled oxygen, and atomized. Cleansers the only sense permitted in this sanctuary of scientific perfection. Pierre stood a regulation 2 paces back, his alabaster face carefully arranged in scholarly curiosity, though his gaze betrayed revulsion at the specimen's excessive facial hair and bilateral symmetry. Its external configuration is a litany of inefficiencies, Pierre offered, eager to please his superior. Mere surface vulgarities. Hestian corrected with the patience of a teacher, explaining a simple concept to a slow-learning child. The true architectural depravity lies within. He selected a plasma scalpel from a floating tray, its cutting edge a silent, contained thread of pure energy. With a movement of fluid grace, refined over countless dissections, he traced a line from the marine's sternum to his navel. The sterile air thickened with the coppery announcement of hemoglobin wet, primal odor that caused Pierre's alactory vents to constrict in a reflexive spasm of disgust. Our digestive core processes nutrients with absolute conversion and zero waste, Hestian lectured, his voice swelling with the pride of a being who considered digestion a solved equation. The Terran system, by contrast, is a primitive chemical sludge vata churning, acidic cauldron of biological noise. Deactivating the scalpel, he reached into the abdominal cavity with gloved fingers designed for manipulating microstructures. A closed around a slick, coiled tube, the small intestine, which made a soft, wet sound as he lifted it, a defiant echo of life in a place designed for its absence. This, he announced, holding up a loop as if presenting evidence of a crime, is the primary absorption apparatus. A needlessly convoluted and moist organ. He lifted, anticipating the extraction of a modest, self-contained length of tissue, a few feet at most. But the organ spooled out from the body like a runway cable, a pinkish rope that he began to lay on the sterile tray beside the slab. He arranged the first loop neatly, and the second, then the third. The pile grew from a tidy coil to a disorganized mound, then a heap that spilled over the tray's edges and slacked onto the pristine floor with a soft, wet sound that made both Alarians flinch. Hestian's serene composure fractured at the edges. His movements lost their fluid grace, becoming jerky and agitated as he tugged, and another yard emerged, slick and seemingly endless. The pile grew larger, covering a significant portion of his lab floor. He stared at the obscene heap, then at the half-empty cavity of the human, and the foundation of his biological understanding began to shudder. This wasn't just inefficiency. It was a deliberate architectural affront to reason itself. Why is it so long? He finally hissed, his condescending hum replaced by a baffled whisper that sliced through the sterile atmosphere like a wound. Little did he know this question would haunt him until his final moments, the first crack in a perfect system, about to be undone by the very flaws it so despised. Sergeant Maria Alvarez regained consciousness in a wave of throbbing pain, the metallic aftertaste of a stun blast lingering on her tongue. She lay on a cold, seamless metallic floor that actively leached warmth from her body. The room, a perfect cube of featureless metal, slowly solidified in her vision, its monolithic surfaces offering the eyes no purchase. Years of training kicked in as she performed a systematic inventory, all limbs present and accounted for, though each filed a loud protest. No catastrophic injuries, just the pounding headache of a platoon marching through her skull. The minimalist design had its flaws, tiny interruptions in its oppressive uniformity. A narrow slit near the floor served as a waste disposal unit. High on one wall, a ventilation grate hummed a monotonous tune. A single pipe slick with condensation ran along another wall. And near the floor, almost invisible against the gray, was the faint hairline outline of a service panel. "My head feels like I used it to tenderize a steak," groaned Corporal Gibson, rolling onto his massive frame. His large, gentle eyes blinked, then unfocused as his hand went to his stomach. "And worse, I'm hungry. Vitals are stable," reported Specialist Ana, already sitting up, fingers pressed against the pulse point in her neck. Her expression remained one of detached clinical assessment. Minor cranial trauma from concussive force, consistent with their energy weapons. Nothing a few hours, a ration pack, and sleep won't fix. "Fat chance on the ration pack part," Gibson rumbled, his stomach punctuating the statement with a gurgle so loud it echoed in the small space. A wet, defiant, thoroughly biological sound in this tomb of silent technology. A section of wall wavered like a heat haze, resolving into the holographic image of an Alarian, tall and willowy, its silver uniform melting into the gray background. Its smooth, featureless head tilted with an unnerving lack of anatomical necessity. "You are subjects in a study of Terran deprivation tolerance." A cold, translated voice filled the air. "Your biological functions will be monitored as they inevitably cease. No sustenance will be provided." "Oh, goody," Maria muttered under her breath. "Science experiment. I was hoping for a firing squad. This is in accordance with the starvation doctrine, proven 100% effective against all 63 species the Imperium has brought to enlightenment." "Enlightenment? You mean you starved them all to death?" Ana's scientific curiosity pierced through her stoic exterior. The hologram, identifying itself as Administrator 7, seemed to register the sound with a faint ripple across its smooth head. "Your species' grossly inefficient metabolic rate is well documented. Complete surrender to biological reality is expected within 3 of your standard days." The hologram vanished, plunging them back into humming silence. The finality of the sentence settled over them, a cold, heavy blanket. 3 days. Not a threat, but a diagnosis. Well, Gibson said, breaking the quiet as he pushed his massive frame to his feet, I guess I'm dying hungry. I always knew it would end this way. I just thought it'd be because I left my wallet at a buffet. Maria was already searching for weaknesses in their prison. The ventilation grate caught her attention a retrofit, a sloppy patch job. Gibson, give me a hand, she commanded, pointing to the grate. Let's see what this glorified toaster oven cover is made of. They heaved against the unyielding metal, which didn't bend, flex, or even creak in unfamiliar alloy, dark and dense as a dreadnought's hull. They made 2 mistakes, Maria announced, a thin, grim smile spreading across her face. First, they put us in an old part of the ship, probably near where they dragged our lander's wreckage. And second, ... double quotes. Her eyes turned cold and sharp as chips of flint. They told us we had 3 days to live. The first 24 hours were a brutal lesson in what true hunger felt like, not just a rumble in the stomach, but a hollowing out of the soul, a creeping fog that settled in the brain and slowed every thought to a crawl. Gibson, usually a boundless font of energy and bad jokes, was reduced to pacing the cell in slow, sluggish circles, telling stories about meals he'd eaten with an increasingly faint voice. But Maria wasn't pacing. She was hunting. Her mind, trained to dismantle fusion engines and bypass security systems, focused on dismantling their prison for parts. She ran her hands over every surface, tapping, listening for variations in density. Ana found her own project. In the seam where the condensation pipe met the wall, a dark, velvety patch of mold no bigger than her thumbnail was thriving in the perpetual dampness. Fascinating, she murmured, scraping a sample with her fingernail. A terrestrial fungus. A spore must have hitched a ride on our gear. Then we can eat it? Gibson asked, his voice a low croak, watching Ana with the focused intensity of a starving wolf spotting a 3-legged rabbit. Technically, Ana said, sniffing the sample. Its scent profile suggests damp earth, ammonia, and old socks, but it appears to be a protein-rich mycelial network. It will taste like dirt and piss, but it is nutritious. I'll take it, Gibson said without hesitation. The cell was silent save for the ragged, panting breaths of 3 humans standing over unconscious guards. They were bruised, bleeding, and exhausted, but they were armed and free. Fighting their way through the ship was a series of ugly, desperate brawls. Following schematics pulled from a fallen guard's datapad, they headed deep into the vessel's industrial underbelly, finally bursting into a vast maintenance hangar. There it was, a squat, ugly, utilitarian freighter docked in a maintenance cradle. The lettering on its side read, Debris Collector 9. It was the most beautiful thing Maria had ever seen. She slid into the pilot seat and hit the main power switch. The lights flickered on, but the engine remained stubbornly silent. A diagnostic message flashed. Biorefined power core depleted. Power-grade fuel required for ignition sequence. They were trapped. The ship had no fuel. From the corridor behind them, the sharp, rhythmic clamping of magnetic boots grew louder, an approaching storm of retribution. But Maria didn't see a dead end. She saw a system with a faulty input. She ran to the side of the ship and ripped open a maintenance panel, revealing a large cylindrical unit labeled Organic Waste Reclamation Unit, the ship's garbage disposal. Her grimy fingers traced its thick power conduits, leading to a secondary power regulation system right next to the massive ignition capacitor. A manic, feral grin spread across her face. The systems are pure, she panted, her voice giddy with the thrill of impending catastrophic engineering. They're designed for a clean energy spike, a single perfect musical note. We're going to hit this capacitor with the electrical equivalent of a mudslide, a chaotic, filthy surge of raw, dirty power so far outside their design parameters, their safety systems won't even know how to react. What followed was a frantic symphony of chaos. Gibson became a one-man demolition crew, tearing through the maintenance hangar with joyous abandon. He ripped up bundles of flammable insulation, smashed open crates of Valerian nutrient paste, and found greasy rags and industrial lubricant. Ana scraped thick green, algae from a leaky water tank, and gathered armfuls of mold from behind loose panels. They dumped everything into the reclamation units, wide hopper-skidder carcasses. Insulation, fungi, algae, grease-soaked rags, even the unconscious guards. There at the door. Gibson yelled, bracing his bulk against the hangar entrance as metal began to buckle inward. "Buy me a minute." Maria screamed, her hands a blur of motion as she found the main power junction box and pried off the cover. Inside were thick, copper-colored bus bars, gleaming and pure. She grabbed the rerouted cables from the reclamation unit and physically clamped the raw ends onto the capacitor's main bus bars, a crude, brutal connection that violated every principle of Valerian engineering. Capacitor began to whine, a low hum rising in pitch to a terrified scream as it glowed a dangerous, overstressed cherry red. The hangar door buckled, a gap appearing at the edge, a silver arm reaching through. Now or never. Gibson bellowed, shoving the arm back with a final, desperate heave. Maria slammed a massive, jury-rigged bypass lever into place. The debris collector 9 lurched to life with a sound like a giant cosmic belch. Thick, foul-smelling black and green smoke poured from its engines. The entire ship shuddered violently, then shot forward, smashing through its docking clamps with a sound like thunder. Maria wrestled with the controls, pointing the garbage scow's blunt nose at the hangar doors. They burst outward in a shower of twisted metal, just as a sleek patrol cutter, a razor blade of a ship named the Inevitable Truth, moved into position to investigate. The cutter's captain stared in frozen disbelief as the ugly, smoking freighter accelerated directly toward them. A tactic so crude, so primitive it wasn't in any of their combat simulators. It was the tactical equivalent of a bar fight. The impact was catastrophic, a deafening, metal-tearing shriek that threw them all against their restraints. The debris collector's reinforced prow plowed deep into the cutter's slender frame, creating a jagged, sparking breach between the vessels. The fight for the Inevitable Truth was a brutal close-quarters affair. The 3 humans covered in grime and grease stormed through the breach like vengeful ghosts. Gibson used a detached hull plate as a makeshift battering ram, clearing a path through the dazed crew warriors trained for clean, orderly combat at a distance, psychologically unprepared for this level of feral, face-to-face violence. The humans were relentless, their stamina the decisive weapon. They fought their way to the bridge, a whirlwind of desperate, ugly, and effective violence, and secured their prize, leaving their broken, garbage-fueled, escape vessel still embedded in the side like a dirty fork stuck in a piece of cake. Standing victorious on the bridge, Gibson immediately located the nutrient paste dispenser. He activated it, and a small, perfectly uniform cylinder of beige paste emerged. He tasted it, and his face contorted in profound, soul-deep disgust. "Tastes like sad plastic," he announced, spitting onto the pristine floor. He reached into a pouch on his belt and pulled out a small blackened object, a saved leg of skidder rat. Taking a satisfying crunchy bite, he chewed thoughtfully. He said to no one in particular, holding up the rat leg. "Need salt." Leaning against the captain's chair, Maria let out a choked sound that might have been a laugh. For the first time in weeks, a genuine smile touched her grimy face as she plotted a course to the nearest Terran Alliance outpost. In his laboratory, light years away, Chief Exhaust Surgeon Hestian stared at the reports coming in. His gaze fell on the anatomical model from the autopsy still rotating on his screen, the ridiculously long, coiled human intestine, a silent, mocking testament to his monumental ignorance. In a moment of soul-shattering clarity, the pieces clicked into place. The blasphemous gut biome, the consumption of inedible materials, the atmospheric anomalies, their infuriating endurance. It wasn't inefficiency. It was resilience. Horrific, messy, foul, undoubtable resilience. A system designed not for a perfect, sterile world, but to survive any world, to eat the rocks and the dirt and the garbage and turn it into fuel for a machine that simply refused to die. The entire foundation of his science, his career, his species, philosophy of biological perfection, crumbled to dust as a single devastating truth burned through his mind. That absurdly long, obscene organ wasn't a flaw. It was the whole point. Behind them, they left a baffled and terrified enemy who had received a very messy, very smelly, and very overdue lesson in the sublime, indomitable inefficiency of human biology.